Hello, everyone. I'm Dario Obasanjo. I'm a product manager at Meta. I support the teams I work on ads monetization, which is really ads, and I work on a bunch of ad products, and I support the teams who work on the in-app browser used in Instagram, Facebook, and Messenger. Today, my talk is titled Product Management, Half Art, Half Science, All Passion. So when I was first asked to do a talk, I thought to myself, what does a product manager talk about at a design conference? So I decided to do some research. So I went on YouTube and I looked at a bunch of the past talks. And I saw a talk from Brian Chesky, which was last year's keynote. And it was pretty cool. I learned that Brian Chesky is the only designer CEO in Fortune 500, which is kind of like a pretty cool achievement. And he talked about their path to IPO and how in 2020, he'd already started having misgivings about how the company was structured and running. And then COVID happened. And their business dropped like 80% overnight. And it was sort of like an existential crisis for the company. And so they had to think about how they rework the company to get more effective and more efficient in this time of crisis. And there was like a really key quote during that presentation. He said, so we talked to the team and we said, hey, we're going to focus on shipping things that we're proud of. If you don't want to put your name on it, you don't ship it. Designers are equal to product managers. Actually, we got rid of the classic product management function. Apple didn't have it either. Actually, we got rid of the classic product management function, and Apple doesn't have it either. When he said that, there was applause in the room. In fact, I wasn't in the room, but it sounded like a standing ovation. And I thought to myself, great, what do I sign myself up for? I'm going to talk about product management at a conference where people applaud the idea of getting rid of product managers. But here I am. So the thing I thought was, I thought about why would people feel this way? Why would they think that? And I realized that a thing about product managers is that they're just a lot of bad ones. I've worked with a bunch, and I'm sure you have too. And when people talk about not wanting product managers, it's because they don't want people like this. And I'm sure everyone has worked with a product manager who lacks vision and strategy, is unable to prioritize, or when they do prioritize, there's no decision-making framework for why they chose option A or option B. You've talked to product managers who have this know-it-all, arrogant attitude that disrespects other disciplines, especially design. You've talked to product managers who lack awareness of the competitive marketplace and don't even kind of have empathy for what the customers are doing. And most importantly, you've met product managers who just don't have a sense of ownership and accountability. So when that happens, I'm not surprised that you go, oh yes, get rid of them, and you applaud, right? And so what I'm going to talk about is not not those kinds of product managers, but what you should expect from a good product manager, and what then you should think about as the expectations you should take back to wherever you're working and ask your product managers to achieve. That's the level they should be at. So let's talk about what do good product managers do? And it's actually really straightforward. The job of a good product manager is to ensure the team is engaged in the highest ROI activities to achieve its goals. Right? That means all disciplines, engineers, designers, data scientists, product marketers are doing the most effective thing to achieve the team's goals. And there are really three primary activities that product managers participate in to ensure that the team is doing this. They are driving strategy, driving execution, and participating in storytelling about the product. So let's start with strategy. Right? When you talk about strategy, lots of people think they have a clear idea of what strategy is, but they're often mistaken. When we talk about product strategy are the unique steps you take as a team to achieve your goals in a way that provides a durable competitive advantage. The most important thing about a strategy is at the end of the day, you've created a durable competitive advantage. And so let's think about how can you tell if you have a good strategy? Again, going back to that definition, there are like a few easy questions you can ask yourself. It's supposed to be unique to you and your strengths. So the question is, how hard is it to copy? How hard is it for someone else to do exactly what you just did? And then secondly, have you created some sort of structural advantage or a moat? Have you done a thing where at the end of your strategy, it's not easy or straightforward for someone else to do exactly what you've done? Right? And I'll run through some examples. If you ask most people, excuse me, what's the first popular ride-sharing service, they'll probably say Lyft or Uber. But it's actually Sidecar. Sidecar was a ride-sharing service I think that was popular in like 2012. It was really the first app that pioneered the idea of getting a ride from a stranger and then paying them for that privilege. And they even had a patent, but their patent was focused on giving people on getting people to a destination using the optimal path. So when they launched and they got a bunch of traction, a company called Zimmyride was like, yo, this is a great idea. We should do it too. And they launched a service called Lyft. And that service became so popular, the whole company became Lyft. Right? And then there was this company called Uber. And Uber had a town car service. And they saw what Lyft had done, and they were like, wow, like, this is actually a better idea than our town car service. And they introduced UberX. And now there's UberX. And now, a key thing to note is Sidecar's idea was a great idea. It actually addressed an unmet customer need of on-demand rides. But it was not unique. Like, lots of people showed up to copy it, right? And there was no moat. And now let's take a look at Uber. So Uber now was in this space and thought to themselves, how do we win? What is our unique advantage? And what's our strategy for building a moat? And Uber had one unique advantage, which was a crap ton of VC funding. And Uber understood that ride-sharing is a multi-sided marketplace. There are riders and there are drivers. And the multi-sided marketplace, the way you win is by creating network effects, where the more riders you have, the more drivers show up. The more drivers you have, the more riders show up. And so what happened was they spent a bunch of money subsidizing both ends. They went to drivers, they gave them a bunch of bonuses, a bunch of incentives, which inspired drivers to show up and join their service. They went to riders and subsidized rides. I remember when getting a cab from my home to the airport cost half as much as it cost to take a taxi. Of course, that's no longer the case, but that was how they subsidized things. And eventually, enough riders, enough drivers showed up such that Uber now has network effects. And like, no, I don't even think about using Lyft. I think about using Uber because of what they did. And now to recap, there was an unmet user need on-demand rides. But meeting that unmet user need was not enough to create a strategy. Uber looked at their unique strength, which is VC funding, and they built a moat via network effects. Strategy. Let's take another example. Xbox versus PlayStation. Way back in the day, Microsoft launched the Xbox after the PlayStation. I was a Microsoft employee back when that launched, and employees used to bring their Xboxes to work after work hours, 5, 6 o'clock, and hook them up together using System Link to play games like Halo. And we kind of discovered that it was a whole lot more fun playing games together with your Xbox than playing them at home by yourself in a networked manner. And this inspired the creation of Xbox Live. And Xbox Live is a way for people to play network games together online. And this was a huge differentiator for Xbox. And it took Sony several years. I think Xbox Live launched in 2002. PlayStation Network didn't really show up until 2006. And it created this, Microsoft addressed this unmet need, and it created an advantage. But it wasn't a durable advantage. I mean, it lasted for a while, like 3 to 4 years is no joke. But eventually, Sony caught up. And now, like, having a network gaming system is just table stakes. Right. So then it was Sony's turn to think about, how do we differentiate? How do we create a moat? What's our unique advantage? Sony's unique advantage was the fact that they had a whole bunch of in-house studios and a whole bunch of valuable IP. So Sony decided to create a strategy around exclusive games. So Sony introduced a bunch of games, Last of Us, God of War, Spider-Man, that you can now only play on PlayStation. And in fact, I own a PlayStation 5 today, despite being an ex-Microsoft employee, because I wanted to play Spider-Man 2, and that's the only way to get it. Right? And that strategy is borne out. It's been several years now, almost 2 decades since Sony started doing that, and Microsoft has been unable to catch up. Right? Again, when you think about unmet user need, playing fun games with others, Microsoft actually did it first. Sony eventually caught up, but that was not enough. Sony looked at the unique strength, intellectual property, in-house studios, and then developed a mode, which was exclusive games. Again, a strategy has to get you to a competitive advantage, and addressing an unmet user need is not enough. One more thing on strategy before we move on. A/B testing is not a strategy. Every once in a while, I talk to a team, and I'm like, what's your strategy? And they're like, oh, we're going to run a bunch of A/B tests. And I'm like, A/B testing is how you optimize your product when you have a strategy, but itself is not a strategy. Going back to the Airbnb example, you don't A/B test your way into building a product where people rent out their rooms and that competes with hotels. You don't A/B test your way there. You do A/B test to find out things like, when I have a listing, the photos taken with my iPhone perform better than if I take professional-looking photos. And Airbnb actually did that and showed that they perform 20% better. Right? But the key thing is that actually doing an A/B test, comparing different things, is not a way to get to building a product that has a durable advantage. It's a way you optimize. Right? And with that, let's move on. Let's talk about execution. One of my favorite quotes about execution is this. Execution is measurable and focused. It's the short-term actions that enable the achievement of your strategy. And without perfect execution, you can't tell if you had a good strategy. And this is a quote from Naomi Gleit, who's a VP of PM at Meta. It's one of my favorite quotes. And I'll give an example going back to Sony. So we talked about Sony's strategy around exclusive games. Now, think about, what if Sony's games weren't great? What if God of War sucked? What if Spider-Man 2 was a mediocre game? If that happened, you'd have looked at Sony and gone, exclusive games are a terrible strategy. But that's actually not the case. The execution was poor, but the strategy was good. And that's the essence of this quote. Like, without perfect execution, you can't tell if you had a good strategy. And so what I'm going to talk about next are the steps that will help you get to a path where you might not execute perfectly, but you'll execute better than average. And it's really straightforward. Step 1, decide what's important. And deciding what's important comes from talking to your customers and intersecting what they tell you with your product vision and strategy. So you're Sony, you want to build exclusive games, talk to a bunch of gamers, figure out what kind of games they care about. Step 2, set goals. And these should be SMART goals, meaning they're specific and measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-based. Being time-based is super important. You want to ensure that you have targets and milestones that you hit quarterly, a half year, multi-year. You want to do that. And then most importantly, you want to measure results. And this is where most execution fails. Because either one, you measure the wrong thing. A kind of classic example of this is early on in the days of mobile, people used to measure and care about how many downloads you got. But if 10 million people download your app and it crashes on startup, you actually have 0 users. Right? So over time, we realized that there were better metrics to look after, metrics like daily active users, monthly active users, and retention. There's also not pivoting when the data shows you're not getting traction. Now, like a decade ago, Microsoft introduced Xbox One. And Microsoft's strategy to differentiate was twofold. They were going to introduce the Kinect, and this is a system where like your body is a controller, and it was a differentiated game system of playing games. And also, they wanted to lean in to entertainment and streaming on your Xbox. But there were 2 challenges with this. One, gamers were disinterested in spending $100 extra for this Kinect system. And two, game developers were like, I don't want to spend a bunch of time building a game for a subset of your users. I want to build a game that everyone who has an Xbox can play. Right. And then when it came to the streaming aspect of the strategy, an Xbox is a $500 brick. That's pretty noisy. And even back then, you could already get devices like the Chromecast or a Fire Stick for like a tenth of the price, like $35, $50, as opposed to getting an Xbox if you only cared about streaming. So Microsoft had this strategy that alienated users, alienated developers, and the data clearly said that. But it took the company way too long to react to that because they were attached to that strategy. And by the time the company tried to turn that around, it was too late, and Sony is now way ahead today. And in fact, Microsoft just had to spend almost $70 billion buying Activision just as a way to continue to stay in the game. Right? And so that's on execution. Right? And now let's talk about storytelling. The product's narrative is storytelling, and storytelling is marketing. So a product's narrative has many audiences: the team, the company leadership, your customers, and your partners. And a good narrative does multiple things. It explains why your product matters, how it will solve your user and business problem, and what the product is or does. So I'll walk you through what I believe is a really valuable tool that PMs at Amazon use for crafting narratives. It's a working backwards process. So PMs at Amazon are kind of like typically create this document that has the product's name, its intended customer, the problem it solves, the benefits of the customer, and a quote either from the customer or an exec. Right? Let's run through an example. Let's use Canva as an example. Canva, the product's name is Canva. The intended customer are small businesses and entrepreneurs. The problem it solves is how to build a professional-looking product if you have little to no design skills. The benefits to a Canva customer are that they get professional-looking products on a budget. And I got this quote from Twitter, I guess it's called X now. Canva is an incredible app for designing pretty much anything you need, a huge selection of templates, fonts, and colors, endless choices at the tip of your fingers, easy editing and sending and sharing. Now, the key thing about this narrative is that, think about all the audiences. The product team looks at this and goes, yep, we know exactly what we're building. We know exactly who we're building for. We know what success looks like. Company leadership can look at this and go, yep, this makes sense. We should totally support this team and give them the resources they need. And customers can look at this and go, yep, I want this product. Now, this doesn't mean that the PM does the marketing. The marketer does. But the thing is, the PM builds a framework and the foundation that the marketing is built on. Okay? So with that, let's recap. So what is good product management about? It's about three things. Strategy, which is the unique steps that give you a durable competitive advantage. Execution, talking to customers, setting smart goals, and being ruthless about measuring them. Finally, it's about storytelling, ensuring that everyone understands who the product is for and what it does for the customer. Now, going back to the title of my talk, product management is half science, where science is sort of a body of knowledge and a process. I've talked to you about a number of repeatable ways where you can get better at strategy and execution and storytelling. It's half art, because art is about creativity. And so when you listen to a customer and talk to them, you apply your own creativity to figure out how to turn their unmet needs into software. And additionally, when you craft your story, that takes your own creativity. And finally, it's about passion. Passion comes in because you have to care. You have to care about the product you're building, you have to care about the problem space, you have to care about the customers, and you have to care about your team. And with that, I want to say thank you for listening to my talk. I'm Obasanjo.